Yes. Okay, so welcome everybody for joining our section today. So I'm Benita, and today we'll be talking about introduction to climate justice. Just checking, can everybody see my screen? Okay, is it?
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
good. So I just want to start with this quote. I think everybody know who Greta Thunberg is. We want you to be helpful. We don't want you to be helpful. We want you to panic. So how much panic we should do? So before I officially start the talk, I actually run this event called TEDx Encompass last October. It's a climate change event as part of the global countdown movement. And with that, we actually interviewed a very famous climate activist in Hong Kong. His name is Zhang Chenyao. He is a blind man, and he has been doing a lot of work on climate justice. So it's a short 2-minute video, but I think the context is in Hong Kong, but I think it applies the rest of the world as well. So I just want to show you this.
各位朋友，我係莊陳友。氣候變化已經成為人類面對最大嘅威脅啦，而氣候變化亦都係最唔公平嘅一件事。有冇想象過，當你大量使用冷氣嘅時候，增加碳排放？氣候變化引致冰川溶解、海水上升，已經威脅到太平洋島最上面嘅居民，有部分有遷徙嘅計劃，可能成為氣候難民。又有冇想象過，當你過度消費嘅時候，引致碳排放、氣候變化，增加酷熱天氣，令到喺劏房裏邊居住嘅朋友有可能係喺室內中暑。當富裕地區嘅人嘅享受，引致喺貧窮處境下嘅人要埋單，呢個就係氣候不公義啦。我哋有冇辦法？當然係有。除咗節省能源之外，低碳想創坊推行使用可再生能源。低碳想創坊與社會服務團體合作建立太陽能站發電，一度一度取替燃煤發電。只要政府、工商界、民間團體以及你同我盡量推行使用香港嘅空間，太陽能電絕對係可以發展出嚟嘅。將學校嘅屋頂、住宅嘅屋頂、工商業大學嘅屋頂、公共建築物嘅屋頂，仲有天橋頂、公園、棕地、水塘。只要我哋盡量使用太陽能電，減少氣候變化，留一個可持續發展同埋公平嘅城市俾下一代，絕對係可能嘅。
So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this short video. So apology is in Cantonese, but I think it shows you some of the problem we face in Hong Kong here, like the subdivided flat, but it also is global problem, the climate refugee. So I think some of us maybe recognize this in the extreme weather around the globe. So we have big problem in Texas with the snowstorm, we have harsh winter in Europe, and last year we also have the heat wave. So climate changes affect every part of the world. And so today I will briefly talk about Sustainable Development Goals, and that's what everything we do here encompasses around the SDG. We'll briefly talk about the science behind climate change very briefly, and then the meat is really climate justice and what is it. And then we'll share some global case study. And then as Encompass is a Hong Kong-based organization, we'll also share some Hong Kong perspective. And finally, we'll end with some actions you can do to combat climate change. So a little bit about myself. My name is Benita. I come from a science background. So in my previous life, before I do this, I actually do research on marine ecology and marine parks in Indonesia. I'm very much concerned about the environment. I've worked with different environmental organizations, and I'm also a scuba diving instructor. So I've seen a lot of effect of the climate change on coral reef, and that's why I'm passionate about this topic and want to share with you today. So just a little bit about Encompass. I know some of you are new to us. We are a social enterprise based in Hong Kong. We work with different charities, trying to give different workshops and experiential learning program. So for example, I've worked with Claudio here, with Engineers Without Border to curate some program with the student. And everything we do is around the SDGs. And just in case you don't know what the SDGs are, they are 17 goals that are developed by the United Nations. As you can see, 13 is climate action, about the planet goal, but there are also other goals like life on land, life below water. And to achieve a more equitable world, we need all 17 goals. The world is, of course, is in a quite a messy state right now with everything that's going on, but I think these are good things for us to think about to achieve the SDGs. So I don't know how many of you seen this diagram. This is called the SDG Kick. So SDGs, the goals in the bottom are planet goals. So climate action here in the bottom is one of it. So we need to have a more healthy planet, healthy biodiversity before we can support people and prosperity. And if you're interested in this concept, I also have another talk later in March on donut economics, which talk about the planetary boundaries and social boundary, which is another concept of thinking about our environment. So if you're interested to learn more, I encourage you to sign up for that donut economics talk, which is also free. So SDG, each of them have a specific target. So as you can see, these are the SDG 13 targets. It include a policy, it include like UN framework. So we won't go into details of all of them, but I think if you are interested to learn more about SDG, it's really important to look beyond just the goal, but look at like what each of the target means. So just briefly, what exactly is climate? So we talk about climate all the time, but climate is actually different from weather. So climate is the average of weather patterns in a longer period of time, usually 30 years or more, whereas weather is more the state of atmosphere at a particular occasion over the short term. So some people mix up weather and climate. They're not exactly the same thing. So there's a good analogy. Weather is like the clothes you're wearing today. So I don't know whether you're wearing short sleeve or long sleeve, depending on where you are today. But actually, climate is the clothes you have in your wardrobe. So over a longer period of time. And when we talk about climate change, it's not only due to natural causes, but also the action of man. But however, we can see the recent rise in global temperature. Almost the scientists agree, like 99% of that is from man-made action. So it can be evidenced by average temperature and extreme weather. So this is a graph which I think a lot of you will be familiar. Basically, it means our global temperature has been increasing since the 1950s at a very alarming rate, and it is not slowing down anytime soon. And just to clarify some concept, some people use climate change and global warming interchangeably. It's not exactly the same thing. Global warming is one of the symptoms of climate change, but climate change can also mean other things. It can also mean melting glacier, heavy rainstorm, rising sea level, and all that. Yes, it's important to distinguish the two. And I don't know how many of you have seen this diagram. It's called the Great Acceleration. So here you can see ocean acidification, you can see methane, you can see energy use, you can see all this increase. And basically this dramatic, continuous, and roughly simultaneous surge in growth rate across a large range of human activity, first recorded in the middle of 20th century and continues to this day, it really showed the human impact on Earth. So these are all correlated. They are not just randomly increasing at the same time. They all have the same cause. And this led to a concept. I don't know how many of you have heard of it. It's called the Afropuncine. So if we look at the geological age, we are now in the Holocene, which is part of the Quaternary life cycle. The Afropuncine epoch is an unofficial unit of geological time used to describe the most recent period in Earth history, so the last 50, 60 years, where human activity started to have a significant impact on the planets and ecosystem. If you want to learn more about Afropuncine, there are some good books about it. I won't go into further detail, but I think this is to just show you really the human impact on climate. So global warming caused all this problem, biodiversity loss, human migration, sea level rise, all sorts of different problems. We won't go into the detail of all the effects, but it can show you it has a large range, right? From our food, our ocean, our crop, and everything. And the future is not is looking quite uncertain beyond 2050. If we don't cut any of our emission, it will be the red line, so not very good. We are rising above 4 degrees. With extreme emission cut, hopefully with the Paris Agreement, we can slow down the increase in global warming. So I don't know how many of you here are familiar with the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement said we want to limit the rise in temperature within 1.5 degrees. If we don't do anything, it's the 4 degrees, so up to the red thing here. With the current policy pledges, it's only within like 2.6, 2.9 degrees. So we need to do a lot more to reach the Paris Agreement. There are some good things recently, like with the Biden administration, US has drawn back the Paris Agreement, which is a good thing because US is one of the biggest emitter of carbon dioxide reaction. But I think as a society, we need to do a lot more to do this. And one of the talk I actually do is circular economy. And there has been some study that to reach that extreme 1.5 just a short increase in temperature, we need to do much more, including using circular economy in our daily life so we can limit our global emission. So not going into all this detail, but basically, if you want to put a dollar sign into the effect of climate change, whether it's air pollution, whether it's famine and hunger, is causing a very big problem. And if you survey people globally, how do they feel about climate change? A lot of people are very concerned. So even though with the pandemic and everything that's going on, climate change is going to be a really big threat, especially after the COVID is gone. It's going to be one of the biggest threats we face as a humanity. Whether you are from a rich country, low country, it affects everybody. So what exactly is climate justice? In a positive sense, it means using climate justice is the solution to climate crisis that are fair for all, and looking at climate change through political, social, economic lens. And why is this important? Because climate change affect people unequally. So even though I said climate change affect everybody, affect rich people, poor people, but however, the effect is unequal. And the reason is because there are some systemic problems that have caused unequal burdens to our community. So for example, low income and disadvantaged people, they often contribute least to the causing climate change. However, they are particularly vulnerable to the negative effects of climate change, which we'll look at it very shortly. They also pay a higher proportion of their income towards the cost of certain policy response, particularly associated with energy and carbon reduction. And they are also benefiting less from those measures than high income household. And another thing is they tend to have least voice in decision making in what make the climate policy factor. So as a movement, we are really wanting to work from the grassroots to create a solution that our climate and energy problem to ensure the right of all people to live, learn, work, play in a healthy and clean environment. So yes, complicated diagram, climate change and social justice. So when we look at climate change and climate justice, we want to look at inequity, and the inequity is from who is actually responsible for the action. So as I said, though, the rich people might they are very large, small percentage of the population. However, they contribute to a lot of the emissions. So who is responsible for that? And if we look at extreme weather, and extreme weather affect a lot of coastal country, and coastal country tend to be developing country. So who do we protect them? We also look at procedural justice. who actually make those decisions to protect climate. We also want to look at intergeneration justice. What are the future of the implications we are doing now affecting? And I will show you shortly about a global case study how this concept is applied in the law. And finally, how the cost and benefit of the policy and response will be shared, how will this transition be addressed. So this is my favorite diagram. I don't know how many of you have seen it. This is a diagram by Oxfam, and it shows you the richest 10% actually account for almost half of the total consumption emission. And why are the rich people consuming more? It can be because they have the ability to consume more product and buy more resources. So for example, in Hong Kong, we love fashion, we buy lots of clothes, but do we actually need that many clothes? What kind of consumption pattern we are doing? And for the poor people, it's not like they don't want to contribute to reducing carbon, but maybe they don't have an option. They are not able to change the fuel they use for home heating from coal because they cannot pay for it, or they may live in an area without public transport alternative, so they may need a vehicle for work. So these are some discrepancy between the rich and poor people. And if you look at the inequality, this is spread across different regions. As you can see, North America contribute to a large amount of carbon emission per capita, whereas Asia tends to be more slower. And if you look at Africa, it's really low. So there's really this disparity across different countries and different continents. And now I just want to show you a short video on the concept of climate justice.
Let's talk about climate justice. The term climate justice evolved from the concept of environmental justice, emerging in the discourse in the 1980s. Environmental justice conceptualized the unjust disposal of toxic waste in predominantly Black American areas in the United States. The aim of the movement was to rethink environmental issues as social issues by ensuring that ethnic minorities and low economic sectors of the population were not disproportionately affected by adverse environmental impacts or hazards. This was done by applying principles of social justice and human rights, such as every individual has dignity, the elimination of inequity, establishing environments that are supportive of all people. In time, the environmental justice movement moved beyond the toxic waste to include the impact of climate change, giving rise to what we know today as climate justice. Climate justice considers the way in which the climate crisis disproportionately impacts marginalized communities. Climate justice is a human-centered approach to climate activism that takes into consideration the common factor that ties the climate movement to other worldwide movements such as workers' rights, racial justice, gender equality, indigenous sovereignty, and many more. 3 easy ways to break down the discourse on climate justice. 1, recognizing that at the global level, those who are the least responsible for climate change suffer its gravest consequences. 2, at the community level, marginalized groups are typically the most exposed and vulnerable to the effect of climate change. 3, the generation level. The idea that present generation have certain duty towards future generation, framing the refusal of young people today to allow for more inaction from people in power. Now, think about some inequalities and injustice that you are aware of in your life, your community, the global community. Think how these inequalities will be exacerbated by climate change. Whatever reason you come up with is exactly why climate action is not enough. We must demand equitable, fair, inclusive solution to the climate crisis. And that is what climate justice is all about.
So before I go into the next part where I give a specific example on climate justice, I will share some case study. I just want to stop here and see if anybody have any questions or comments of what I shared so far on the concept of climate justice. Okay. I don't know, it's a small or shy group. I'll go on and maybe we'll take questions in the end. In the video we just saw, it talks about environmental racism, about how Black people are being more affected. These are some data from US, and I think we have a right group here. I know there are people from Scotland. I know Claudia is from Italy, but I think this exists in every country. People of color or marginalized group are more disproportionately affected by the effect of environmental pollution or climate change. And if we look at some specific study, this is a US case. The Black Americans are more likely to bear impacts of climate change. For example, they are more vulnerable to exposure to environmental hazards. For example, because they are also forced to work in coal mine in the early 19th century. And there is also a recent study to find out that climate change and increased premature birth are specifically affected Black mothers, and women who are exposed to higher temperature on air pollution are more likely to face pregnancy risk. So it is very real. It's not just a concept. It does affect people. And the second example, I know there are some ladies here in the room, is gender inequality. Women, they are more globally, they are more likely to face poverty, and they are all more likely to be displaced by climate change. And another problem is decision making. Women tend to be less represented in the decision making. However, women are being affected more by climate change, but they don't have the voice in their community. And here's another example. For example, in Sudan and Nepal, climate change has forced men to leave their villages to seek for work elsewhere, leaving women to shoulder increased household responsibility in degraded environments. So women have this society and cultural role as food producer, as caretaker. However, they don't have the voice. We can talk about women and gender justice in a separate another topic, just to give you some example how climate justice is linked to race and gender. And climate change is definitely, this is a very complicated academic diagram, but basically here it shows you that some groups are more vulnerable to climate change because of exposure or sensitivity to the impact, to the capacity of them to respond. And this can be because of their poverty, because of their occupation, because of their social norm. So as I said, like those in the coastal community are more vulnerable. Maybe those with existing health risks, so older people are more being affected. Those live in low-income communities with limited access to healthcare. Those people who are poor and they are uninsured. So they have difficulty accessing healthcare. So in some parts of the world, I don't know where you're from, having quality healthcare is not a given. You need to pay a high price for it. It can also be an education issue that people have limited availability of information or resource in their native language. So let's say you're in Hong Kong and you're an ethnic minority that doesn't speak English or Chinese. There's very little information in your mother tongue that tells you what actually happened. So without information, you cannot make the decision. Also, poor people have less ability to relocate or rebuild after disaster. So imagine those living in Indonesia, Philippines, coastal village, and they face like a big flooding. Where can they move? not like you're in Hong Kong, or you can like, oh, I can move to UK, I can move to Australia. You don't have that options. So sorry, this diagram is not showing very clearly, but basically the point here is because of the different oppression that people feel, whether it's decision, whether it's lower benefits, whether it's even though they have lower contribution in climate change, they have less voice to say it. There's also this concept of compound climate injustice. And if you want to read more on this topic, this website called climatejustice.org.uk have really good resource and also case study from UK. I know one of you from Scotland, and I also put resources at the end of this presentation so you can refer to it. Other example of how climate change affected human rights, if you put it a dollar sign, it affect our right to food, our right to life, our right to water, sanitation, and health. So this is all linked to different SDGs. So for example, the right to clean water is SDG 6, the right to food, no hunger is SDG 2, and also right to adequate housing and the right to life, this is reduce inequality. So we can say climate change really underpins all the SDG and really have a big effect on all of us. So what are some principles of climate justice? This is still being developed. There's no international consensus on it. But if you're interested, Mary Robinson Foundation have some really good principles on climate justice. And this include respect and protecting human rights, supporting the right to development, share benefits and burden equitably. And we'll see shortly like how the Paris Agreement do that. Ensure that decisions on climate change are participatory, transparent, and accountable. So with many global policy now, is a lot of them are not transparent. We don't know how those decisions are coming into place, who are those affected. Highlight gender equality and equity. So as I said, climate justice and gender has a big effect, and gender is also SDG 5. So that's one of it. Harness the transformative power of education for climate stewardship. So educating the community how they can do better for the climate, reduce their emission, and using effective partnership to secure climate justice. So the last one is really SDG 17, which is a SDG goal that are not really talking about partnership with different institutions, different stakeholders. So one case in point is Paris Agreement. So Paris Agreement is this famous agreement where the 196 countries come to say the global warming should be well below 2.2 degrees, but most is even better within 1.5 degree. So for example, to show you, US is responsible for 27% of the world's greenhouse gas emission, and the European Union collectively accounted for 25%. However, poor countries like India only responsible for 3%. So rich countries make most of the mess, most of the carbon emission, and they should be more responsible for cleaning up for it. The second one is rich countries should steer huge amounts of money to poor ones. And the reason is because developing countries need financial assistance to help so they can have the technology for renewable energy, whether it's wind power or solar power, so they can adapt with coping climate change. So to give you a dollar figure, US has doubled its contribution to climate adaptation funding from 400 million to 800 million in 2000. However, there are other rich countries like Russia and Saudi Arabia. They are more selfish. They offer nothing to help. However, if we look at the world as a whole, developing countries still aren't close to raising 100 billion per year in climate finance that is necessary to make the change. So just some food for thought here. And another case I want to share is Biden. I don't know how many of you have been following the US news. So Biden first rejoined the Paris Agreement as he joined the office. He also set up a separate environmental justice office at the Justice Department and ordered the government to spend at least 40% of its sustainability investment on disadvantaged community. As part of the unprecedented push to cut the nation's greenhouse gas emission and create new jobs, This environmental agency will work across federal government to invest in low income and minority communities. So this is a good thing. And I think more countries should set up a separate environmental justice department. And here I talk about the intergeneration justice concept just now. This is a case. The Dutch court case based on this concept that the current generation should not give the burden to future generation. It ordered in 2018 the government to cut the nation's greenhouse gas emission by 25% from 1990 levels by the end of 2020. Is the court order for the government to reduce the gas emission to a level that fulfill the government's affirmative obligation. So this is a historical decision. If you want to read on climate justice, this is a very good case. So this is called the rise of future generation. And this court case, the concept has been inspiring other countries. For example, there's a case similar in France that also talk about the rise of a future generation. This is another recent case. This is in the Philippines. The Philippines did a 3E investigation into whether 47 of the world's biggest fossil fuel firms, collectively known as the carbon major, could be held accountable for violating the rights of the citizens of the damage caused by global warming. However, the court case is still actually going on, and that is because the legal responsibility for climate change is not currently covered by current international human rights law. So current human rights law doesn't have this law on environmental justice, but I think it's now being discussed in the court whether this carbon major or environmental polluter can be sued for the damage on climate change. Another concept here is a climate refugee, which we see in the opening video. It is a very big problem. So the statistics is very scary. So if you look at the statistics, every second we're talking now, there has been one person that is displaced by disaster. And globally, there has been more than 22 million people that have been displaced because of climate or weather disaster. It's forecasted that 160 million people are at risk of sea level rise, and droughts will threaten an estimated around 15 million people by 2050. If you look at the Gobi Desert, it's expanded 3,600 square kilometers a year, and Morocco, Tunisia, and Libya lose 1,000 square kilometers of productive land every year. So this is all very statistics. And if you want to look at the numbers to put things into perspective, this is a number to show you the people that have been displaced around the world because of weather event. I don't have the latest figures for 2020, but I think it is pretty much the same. And for those who are not from Hong Kong, you hear the Hong Kong part now. So if we look at Hong Kong, and I think those of us here will experience that, we have experienced very hot days and hot nights. So I think it was last May in the Mother's Day, we have the warmest Mother's Days on record. We have one of the warmest heat wave for many years. And like extreme typhoon, like the typhoon magnet, the level 10 typhoon has affected Hong Kong extremely. So climate change does affect Hong Kong. And if we look at Hong Kong inequality, our Gini coefficient is 0.539, which means we are very unequal world. Even though we rank a lot of that, we also our GDP rank quite high. We live in a very unequal society. And one example is Shek Kip Mei, which is a poor neighborhood in Hong Kong. You find that nearly 50% of the flats that are surveyed in Shek Kip Mei, the temperature was uncomfortable, and that's around 30 degrees Celsius. And the reason is because people do not have access to air conditioning, or they choose not to use air conditioning due to high electricity costs. And if you have ever lived in a summer in Hong Kong, you would know Hong Kong summers can be very unbearable. It can be up to 36, 37 degrees with the heat And without that, I'm not saying air conditioning is a good thing, but the other problem is because these flats are usually very poor ventilated. So even if you don't, if you just open the window, it's still very hot. So what can we do? There's the climate change will have a dollar price. I know Hong Kong people love money, and if you put on the dollar signs on Hong Kong climate change, it will mean direct expenditure. We'll be spending more in heating or cooling demand. Will the indirect cost because of weather and typhoon causing the damage. It can be international costs. Hong Kong people love food overseas. We love sushi. We love shipping other things. This will affect our import costs. It will also affect our policy costs. The chief executive has announced a plan for net zero by 2050. We don't know how we get there. So these are some examples. So what is Hong Kong's responsibility in climate justice? To put it very sadly, not a lot. And the reason is because Hong Kong is part of China. And Hong Kong and China in international standard is still being considered as a poor developing country. So China doesn't have a responsibility according to the Paris Agreement to do much about climate change. So to put another way, Hong Kong are free according to international law to pollute. But this is not to say this is right, but it's just to saying that legally, international rights standards, we don't need to do anything, which is a very sad thing if you want to think about it. And if you look at Hong Kong as a whole, we need 4.2 Earths if everybody live in Hong Kong lifestyle. So that means we are not very sustainable, and a lot of that is from commercial, transport, food, and all that. One good thing though, if you ask Hong Kong people which SDG they care most about, you will see SDG 13 is the one that they care most. So the score is 8.81. However, if you look at the least care about SDG, that's SDG 12, which is the responsible consumption and production, which I think is very sad because Hong Kong in such a consumer society, if we are all being more responsible in our consumption, we can reduce our carbon emission, we can reduce all that carbon footprint to 4.2 Earth. So we are not consuming 4.2 Earth. So Hong Kong also have the climate change action plan. So there has been a science-based target that we now the emission is 2.03 per capita, but we are hoping to go to net zero by 2050. However, like the exact policy of how we get there is unclear right now. So this is a research by Hong Kong 2050. If you're interested to know more, as I said, we need very strong action so we can reach those targets to achieve net zero 2050 emission. So just showing you some of the climate action in Hong Kong. So Friday for Future is a global action. So the students like Greta Thunberg, they protest every Friday on climate change. And in Hong Kong, in 2019, a group of students, they actually have about 1,000 of them in Central. They actually protest and ask the government to do more on environmental work. I think the EPD, the Environmental Protection Department chief, did meet with them. How much of that have changed since the protest, I'm not sure, but at least the government has been listening to these young people. And Lance Lau is our Hong Kong version of Greta Thunberg. He's a young friend of mine, very passionate young man. He has been doing his part in protesting and spreading this message about this campaign, going to different communities to spread this message. So salute to Lance and his work. So to build climate resilience globally, we need to look at both mitigation and adaptation. So mitigation, as in we need to reduce our ecological footprint. We need to be more energy efficient. We need to use electric car and all that. But we also need to look at adaptation. If climate change continue to happen, how can we adapt to it? How can we manage disaster better? So we know flooding, we know snowstorm is now a big problem. How can we do better in flood, in infrastructure upgrades? So at TEDx and Campus, we as I said, we did a global. We are really concerned about climate change, and last October we did an event on that. And we are now doing this series of follow-up talks, hoping to educate the community on that. And we can discuss as a group what other strategies you have. So here are some suggestions on how you can have a more sustainable lifestyle, whether it's repairing a reuse of thing, whether it's starting it down your energy consumption. I'm sure as a group in here, we have a lot of idea. So I just want to leave you with this quote. Future generation will most likely look back at this moment as the single most significant turning point for action. So see what is your part in doing this. So I just want to do a little promotion. So other than this talk on climate justice, we're going to do a few other climate talk. So I don't know how many of you have eco-anxiety. I certainly have. I sometimes wake up in the middle of night. I'm worried about like what our climate will be, how warm will it be. Like sometimes when the Hong Kong gets so hot, I'm like worried about like where is this planet is really heading. So it's not all about negative, but it's hopefully we change that anxiety into positive action. So the talk will be from eco-anxiety, talking about the emotions about climate change, to climate communication. So we will talk about some ways you can communicate climate science to other people. So I don't know if you have other friends who are climate deniers, they don't think climate change is happening, or they don't think it's very serious, they don't want to do anything about it. How can you communicate to them? So that's one talk. Another talk is climate change and coffee. I love drinking coffee, and I probably drink too much coffee. And I would use coffee as an example on how climate change has impacted this industry and what we can do about it. So if you're a coffee lover, this is a great talk for you. I know this is not showing very clearly, but the point here is this is a game called Climate Collage, and I really recommend all of you to join it if you are interested in the climate science. So if you just Google Climate Collage, there's a website, and I think, if I believe so, almost all of the sections for the public is free. It's either online or depending on where you live in the world. There are also some local workshops. It's a game developed by some French creator, and basically you see all these like cards here. They're the cause and effect of climate change. So for example, carbon emission led to global warming led to glacier melting led to different ocean acidification problem and all that. So it's a very complicated diagram, but it takes about 2 to 3 hours. And it's very fun. I think even for me, I think I know a lot about climate science. I still learn a lot from it. So you're welcome to join. And I didn't invent this game. I just become a facilitator. But you're welcome to join any of the online workshop that are hosted by this one. Just go to the website, or if you're interested in one for your group and community, you can also message me. I can organize something for your group as well. So finally, these are some resources on climate justice. And as I said, you will get all the slides, so don't worry about copying this. Mary Robertson is a very good thought leader on the thought leader on the topic. So she came up with this book in 2019 about how to look at climate justice with feminist solution. And again, her website has tons of resources. Dominic Rosa and Christian Sandel has a book on climate justice and introduction. It's more like a textbook, more case study, but it's a good read. David Lemmy and in TEDx Countdown, he also did a talk on climate justice can't happen without racial justice. Very, very powerful talk. And finally, the website in UK, Climate Justice, is also a good resource on this topic. So sorry, I know I usually talk too fast, but I want to make sure. I think we have about 10-minute time to see if the group here have any questions or comments, or what you thought about it, Lynn. Yeah.
No, it's been very, very interesting. What can we as individuals do? I mean, obviously we can lobby governments, etc., to try and change things, but what as individuals can we do in a day-to-day life?
I mean, like some of the action I mentioned, right? You can do individual behavior change, but I think also, um, well, voting is powerful. Like voting for people who share similar beliefs
Yes.
with you on climate change, and I also believe in multi-stakeholder things. So sometimes it work with the government, sometimes you can also work with the business. I think has a big impact as well. So business, I personally I work with a lot of different corporations, and some of them now have climate policy or climate goals, and business account for a lot of climate emission as well. So if, for example, in my capacity, I work with the corporates, and whether to set climate goals or SDG goals.
Sure.
But I think different individual have different way. I also want to recommend, if you're interested in individual actions, I don't know if you have seen this movie. Really recommend it. Let me show it. Give me a sec. So this movie is called The Main. I'm not sure if you can get it on DVD or somewhere on Netflix.
Okay.
It's a French movie. Documentary came out in 2018, and it's one of my favorite documentary of all time. And it's not only about climate change, but about different social issues or community issues as well. And they just interview people from UK, from India, from Africa, and different solutions, how they work within the community on making a change. And another example I can show you, I'm sure there's something similar in Scotland. There's this called the Buy Nothing Project, and you can start with the community. And basically, you can start it in any neighborhood, anywhere in the world, and say, I don't want to buy a vacuum cleaner. I don't want to buy a CD machine, but I will ask people in my community if somebody can share. So
Yes.
reduce consumption, and yeah. I don't know where you live in, but you can start something with this in your community, and it just requires a little bit of training. So if you want to do as a group, you receive training, and they tell you how to run this group to make sure it's fair for everybody. So I don't know if there's something similar in your group.
It is. I'm involved in a couple of charities locally where we do clothes swap shops, and they've been very successful, and it's keeping clothes away from landfill. And it's meaning that basically you don't really need to buy any new clothes. Your clothes are just simply swapped, and they're swapped there's no cash involved. You just hand in some clothes that you no longer want, and you get points for them on a card. And then later, when there's something that you maybe would like for a period of time, you can use your points to buy that particular clothing. So you may, in fact, see a piece of clothing that you want for a particular event. You can take it away, wear it, wash it, and then send it back, and you will get your points refunded, and someone else gets a chance of wearing it. So it saves you a huge amount of money, but it keeps the clothing away from landfill, and that's something that a lot of local communities are doing. And I think that's very important. It's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, very good. I think that's a good one. And I don't know, have you heard of the Buy Nothing Project?
Sorry, the what project?
The Buy Nothing Project, the one I shared just now.
Not prior to today.
Yeah, but yeah, I really recommend this as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So let me answer Claudio and Winnie question. So the first question, we did not understand much the connection between climate change and gender. How are women are more affected than men from climate change? So one example is women usually face higher risk and greater burden because they are in poverty, and they usually they're not able to participate in decision-making process. in general, I think across the world, and that gender equality is very apparent. Women are not allowed to make decisions that are affecting them, and another thing is in many communities, especially poor communities, women are the primary food producers, and they are provided for working and cooking fuel. So they actually decide what kind of way that they're consuming. So they actually have a big role to play. However, they are not being asked to voice their opinion. And yeah, so that's one thing. So the second question, you gave us an example of what we can do about climate change, what we can do about climate injustice. Well, demonstrating is one way. That's a very easy way of voicing out your opinion. But I also think there are other things you can do. So, for example, in Hong Kong, now there has been another consultation on the producer responsibility scheme, whether the people generating waste should be charged for the number of waste that are being produced. This has been pushed in the LESCO, but unfortunately it wasn't passed, and now it's being consulted again. So as citizen, if you are not in the protest time, you can submit your opinion, because that has a direct effect on climate emission as well. So let me see. So I think that's Jasmine. I think this session is great on drawing connection between climate concern and more in-depth social problem. I joined a section recommended by Benita on Hack Your Box. Yes, so maybe I'll introduce as well. Thanks, Jasmine, for recommending. Sorry, give me 1 second. So I have recommended this to Cordo in this group as well, and Lynn. And if you haven't joined it, I also recommend this. Let me share.
Okay.
Give me a sec. Okay, so this is a methodology divided by, I think, this group called Co-Create Impact. And basically, it will look at a box. So you create a box about your beliefs, your what positive things, what negative things you can do, what is your agenda, and then it will look at outside the box. If you do something like this, what impact you will make, how you will see or interact with the world differently. So it's about an hour and 1 hour of section. And I think me, Jasmine, and Claudio have all done it. It's very interactive, very different from the style. The webinar I do is usually tend to be more informative than interactive, but this one is very interactive, and I think it will help you to come up with individual solution, what you can yourself can do to make a positive impact. So I think go to this website. I think there's somewhere you can join these sections for free and learn more about it. So I would recommend this as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think there are different people using different ways to promote the concept of climate change, climate justice, and individual actions. And different people do it differently. I do it on a more webinar style. This Hack Your Box is more interactive style. And I think you learn different things from different people. Yeah. Thank you. Any other comments from Jasmine, JC, or Claudio?
Just want to say something. This is JC. Do you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I just want to respond to the question about how climate change affect female. I think for people living in urban areas, it will be a little bit difficult for us to imagine that. But if we are talking about people living in villages in the developing countries, then the effects of climate change on female could be seen easily, because female, generally speaking, in villages in developing countries would not be able to have enough food, for instance. And with climate change, it will be very difficult for them to even to grow enough food. And then the situation will be that female will be the one who will go starving. So this is just one very simple example showing us about the problem of climate change and the problem of climate change on FEMA. And I would also like to say that in the talk, you talk about the US situation, but actually people are more concerned not just about the US, but about China as well, because China is now the #1 GHG emitter in the world. So definitely there is a need for China to do much more things. And actually the Chinese government, I think, is trying very hard to reduce the GHG emissions. They have set a target to make China become net zero emitter by 2050 or 60. I think it is 2060. We will not know whether they can achieve that. But and there are also people arguing that actually if there's a need to resolve the problem of climate change, we cannot just rely on the developed countries. We have to cooperate, and we have to get the assistance from the developing countries, especially China. And the reason is because China is now getting richer and richer, and there are more people who can consume, and their lifestyle is actually very much like the people in the developed countries. All right. So there are scholars, for example, Paul Harris from the HAI, Education University of Hong Kong, talk about repeatedly talking about a need to make sure that the wealthy people in the world should be held responsible for reducing the effects of climate change. So he talks about polluter pays principle and so on. All right. So this is just one thing that we may also think about. We should not just focus on the so-called developed countries and ask the people there to be held responsible for climate change. All right. Actually, the problem right now is the developing people, the people in the developing countries are also creating a lot of troubles right now.
Thank you, JC.
Yeah, this,
that's a good perspective. Are you working on this area as well?
not exactly. I'm a teacher, so.
Oh, okay. Okay. Are you teaching on zoology or teaching on liberal study?
No, actually, in university.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much. Yeah. So maybe next time I do this talk, I will talk more about how developing countries can do their part as well. So thank you very much for that perspective. And any more comment from you, Claudio? I think JC gave you a very good answer. He answered better than me on the gender part. So I hope that was helpful. Okay, so yes, it's 10:02 now. So I think I will close tonight. So thank you, JC. I think it's the first time I saw you in our talk. And if you're interested in our other climate talk, please join our eco anxiety or the climate change on coffee one. And I hope I know you probably maybe know more than me, but you find some of the things that I share today is maybe new to you.
No, definitely you have been doing a very good job. There are things that I don't understand, so I learned something from you as well.
Okay, and you'll get the deck. So you're welcome to message me separately as well to ask more questions.
Oh yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, JC. Good night.
Yeah, bye.
Goodbye.